Hi, everyone. Welcome to the San Diego Festival of Books Meet the Author Q&A series. I'm Elisabeth Frausto. I'm a reporter with the Jolla Light, which is part of the San Diego Union-Tribune community press. I'm an avid reader myself, and I'm honored to be part of this series. Today, I'm really excited, though, to be in conversation with longtime writing partners and best friends, Christina Hobbs and Lauren Billings, better known as Christina Lauren. This #1 international best-selling co-author duo writes both young adult and adult fiction and has produced 17 New York Times best-selling novels. Their books have been translated into more than 30 languages. Today, we'll uncover their latest novel called The Soulmate Equation, a fun and witty story about what happens when two people with everything on the line are thrown together by science, or is it fate? For the next 30 minutes, we'll learn about the chemistry of this dynamic writing duo and whether love can be calculated. Then we will take a few minutes to answer your questions submitted through the Facebook chat. So now let's find out if The Soulmate Equation is a match made in heaven. Christina, Lauren, thank you so much for joining us today. I really enjoyed this book, and I can't wait to dive in and get to know you guys both better. So first of all, let's start off with The Soulmate Equation. What's it about?
Well, thank you for having us. It's so nice to spend some time with you. Soulmate Equation is a story about, it's our first single mom character. Her name is Jess Davis. And she has a 7-year-old daughter. She's very happy in her routine and her life, and she doesn't want to do anything in the dating world until her daughter is grown. She has a lot of issues about parenting and guilt and all this stuff. And her best friend, Fizzy, who is a romance novelist, is not having this. She wants Jess to get out there. And so she takes Jess to this new DNA matchmaking startup company that's about to go public. And she convinces Jess to do the test, just spit in the vial and send it off. And Jess does it and forgets about it until she matches with the company's founder at an unprecedented level. And it turns out she already knows him from the coffee shop she goes to every morning, and she does not like him. So that's where it starts.
Awesome. Well, I mean, genetic matchmaking to find your biological soulmate. That was a new one I hadn't seen before. Where did this idea come from?
So we had an idea for like a soulmate book, but we weren't really sure, what to do with it. We were doing 23andMe at the time. So like, not only does it give you like, your ancestry and that kind of stuff, but it tells you like if you're going to like cilantro or like what your earwax is like, or, all of these sort of random things. And at the same time, we were sort of following, Lo had been reading the Theranos, about the Theranos trial stuff that was happening. The book's called Bad Blood, I believe, right?
Yep, it's by John Carreyrou.
Yeah, so we were sort of fascinated by this idea that there's this technology that really could, if it was true, change the world. And that sort of, then we started talking about like, what if there was a dating thing? And there are companies that are doing something similar to this. I mean, they're like looking at pheromones and, that kind of stuff. So we just sort of took it from there.
Yeah. I mean, I found it really fascinating. And then I was reading on your website that Lauren also has a PhD in neuroscience. So did that factor in at all to the writing of this, Lauren?
I mean, I think it did in the sense that it was totally overwritten the first time around. Like the first time we drafted, it was just like science, And I think, Christina really helped pair that.
It was not sciencey.
Which is good, right? Because, we want it to be a romance. We don't want it to be a pop science theoretical book. But so I do think that the science part was really fun for me. Just in all seriousness, that part was really fun because I got to think about it from the perspective of if I was going to invest in this company, what would I need to see on their investor sheets in order for me to feel convinced that this is actually a thing that could ever happen? And so just imagining that and kind of dreaming it up was just really fun.
I loved that like nothing ruins a book for Lo more than when the science is just like completely made lazy, as she would say, but just like so insanely unrealistic. So it was kind of fun to like fudge it a little and see how close could be like the main parts are accurate, like how he does his research and how they put all this data together and stuff is pretty realistic. It's just
the scale of it is the scale of it is huge. I mean, this is a longitudinal study that would have taken probably 20 years. So we just sort of like packed that into his 10-year study and started in a present.
That's really interesting. So, you said something really interesting earlier, Lauren, is that, what would you want to see on the, potential investor sheet? Would you both invest in this company? One character in the book says at a certain point, or asks, is love a quality you can quantify? What do you guys think about this?
I think I would invest in it if they had been as thorough as genetically had been in the book, because genetically it's not just looking at genes, and they're also looking at personality assessments and long-term, self-reporting on happiness and relationships. And they're looking at measures of sexual attraction and things like that. They're really taking in the whole sort of sphere of relationships from beginning of attraction to, later when you've been married for years. So if somebody had been that thoughtful and that kind of meticulous about it, I totally would invest. Yeah,
I would. There was an aspect that was really exciting when we were doing it, where we were sort of like, this really would change the world. It would change dating, because it's not just finding romantic soulmates and romantic partners. It's in finding a best friend and finding a doctor and finding a nanny, all of these relationships, whether they're romantic or not, finding that person that would be the most compatible to you. So there are a few moments it would be really exciting, then not to have to be like, oh, right, it's not real.
That's not what this book is about. I mean, I think the other thing too is like, and we don't talk about it in the book, obviously, because it's a romance, but there's potential that you have multiple high scores, right? Like,
right.
River are a 98, but Jess and Fizzy might take the test and find out that they're a 97. Like, it doesn't have to be, like she's saying, romantic love. And so we're not looking for that one person. We're looking at who are you most likely to be compatible with.
Yep.
Which makes it, I think, a little less scary in terms of like, apocalyptic, like you have one person you will ever love. Like,
yeah, I think that concept is really interesting, that, you can have more than one soulmate, for a romance or a best friendship, or I don't know, a colleague, a business partner, etc. And so, talking about the potential for this and real world applications, I mean, we have, apps and websites that'll do genetic testing, and we have dating apps and whatnot. How likely do you think this genetic matchmaking is, imminently or in the near future?
I'm letting the science person answer this one.
I think it's coming. I mean, like Christina said, companies are trying to do it. They're either looking at different sort of histocompatibility complexes, or they're looking at pheromones, genetic pheromone signatures. I think people are like just starting to scratch the surface of what's possible. But my main gripe with what people are trying, and I think one of the reasons why none of them have been successful yet, is they're only looking at a very few signatures, right? And so, one of the things that we've said is, if you think about genetic dating as like a 20,000 to 25,000 question profile, right? Where you're answering 25,000 questions and you're seeing where you align. If you're only looking at 4 questions between you and someone else, or 4 genes, you're not going to get a very deep picture of compatibility. And so I think what's difficult is that the magnitude of the array has to be so much bigger than what anyone's doing. And that's just logistically hard for any company to do.
Yeah.
So I think it's in the future, but I don't know if the technology is there yet.
Gotcha. Thanks. Yeah. Shifting gears a little bit, one of the things that I loved about this book is that it's as much about the characters' relationships as it is almost a love letter to San Diego. I mean, we're local here, so anyone who is also local will recognize and appreciate, the settings, from the biotech neighborhoods of La Jolla to the scenery on Shelter Island and the vibrancy of University Heights and North Park. How did that come about, and what makes San Diego maybe, just the right setting for the soulmate equation?
Well, so San Diego is special to the two of us because this is where we met. We met at San Diego Comic-Con for the first time in 2009. So we were both writing fan fiction in there to be total dorks, and Lo was putting on a panel on FanWorks and it invited me. So that's a special place for us. We go every year. But Lo's family is also from there. So I'll let her talk about her aunt.
Oh, yeah. So my aunt and uncle have lived there my whole life. And so we would kind of take turns, like coming down. I grew up in Berkeley. So we would spend every other Christmas or Thanksgiving down in San Diego with my mom's sister and her family. And when my aunt and uncle retired and their kids were grown and had kids of their own, they bought the apartment complex where the book is actually based. It is on Park Avenue. It looks just like it's described in the book. And they bought it so that they could live together with their kids and their families if the kids needed it at some point. And over the years, both of their kids have moved there with their families, and they're raising their kids kind of with the grandparents, and they, you know, it's a really lovely situation. So we sort of modeled it after that. We took some fictional license, of course, but yeah, and you know, they're just wonderful people. They have like the most just lovely sense of curiosity and adventure, and they're very special. So.
And what we put in the book is so much like what's there. Like, I remember visiting, we always go and see her aunt, and there's really a Thai restaurant next door, and you can hear it and smell it. And there are people waiting on the porch for their food, and somebody's yelling at them to get off the porch. And Twigs is right down the street. And, you know, it's really just this like bougainvillea covered, wonderful little thing in the city.
Yeah, I love that. I love the insertion of those details that, you know, made the book feel so real, because the details are so real. I mean, they're, you know, they exist. So yeah, that was really fun, and made, you know, reading it even more special to me. So let's talk about Christina Lauren. You know, I mean, if you took the genetically matched, or, you know, if you guys spit in the vials there, where would your match come out?
I mean, I think it would be a diamond match. Like, no question. No question, you know.
I love that. How did you both decide to write together then all those years ago?
Who knows?
It's so funny because we are so very, very different, which I think is sort of perfect, because, you know, Rivers it's not looking for people who are alike. It's just looking for like similar patterns to find who you're compatible with. So Lo and I are so very different, but yet we are like the same and weird in the exact same ways. So we met, like I said, at Comic-Con, and it was the first time we had ever met. And we just like got along in this strange way, and just decided like to write something together. And we wrote like a little like fan fiction short story together, and it was really fun. And we just went, do you want to write a book? And it's now, looking back, it seems really strange that we didn't think of, you know, exactly what that would encompass. But at the time we were just like, yeah, let's do it. And so we
were so naive.
We were so naive. And so we just started writing together, and it was really fun, because the thing about writing with Lo is we're really writing for sort of an audience of one. So I'm writing for my best friend. She's writing for her best friend. So if I write something and she tells me that it's hilarious or whatever, I know that it's like I've done what I'm supposed to do. And it's funny that really hasn't changed that much in all of the books that we've written.
And I think the fact that we both read so much and are so kind of deep in the genre and in fiction in general means that we are also constantly growing as readers. And so it's not like we're trying to please our 2009 selves. Like, we're seeing where our books need to fit in modern day. And I think that stretches us, but we also still trust each other's feedback to be the one that matters, right?
Yeah.
I love that. Can you tell me more about your writing process? I mean, two people writing one book, or many books, but you know, what's that process like for you? How does collaboration work? You know, do you switch off like one chapter each? Like, tell me about the process.
So we always outline in person, and that has only been there's only been a wrench thrown at when the pandemic hit.
Right.
But for the most part, you know, we did quarantine so that we could drive out to see each other when we needed to. But you know, we always outline together. There's a different vibe when we're in the same room, and we also get to like hang out with our families and then go talk about the outline for a bit and then come back and make dinner. And then the conversation about the book weaves in and out of our time together, and things bubble up, and it's just more fun. And then we go to our separate houses, obviously, because she's in Utah and I'm in California. And we draft. So we usually draft every other chapter. So I'll do like 1, 3, 5, 7. She'll do 2, 4, 6, 8. And as we draft them, we compile them so that it starts to take the shape of a book, you know, relatively early on. And we can always go back and edit and stuff. And I think the thing is, like, we spend a lot of time revising, because that's most writers know that's where the magic really happens. Drafting is hard. It can be messy. But you make a book really what you want it to be in the edits. And I think one of the things that's been really nice about our writing collaboration is that we were writers together first, and the friendship kind of built around that. So there's this shared ego. There's not a Christina ego or a Lauren ego. So there's no hurt feelings. The whole point is to make the book that we want it to be, right? So whatever that takes. And yeah, so we just spend a lot of time revising.
Yeah, that's lovely. What's important in making sure that you work together to have a cohesive writing style? Like what do you look for to make sure that those chapters kind of flow together?
Oh, that's a good question. I think there are a lot of people who don't read co-authored books because they have this idea in their head that they're going to be disjointed. So one of our favorite things is people will come up to us at events or even on Twitter. They'll say something that they are like today years old when they realize that Christina Lauren was two people. And that's like the biggest compliment to us that people can't tell. So if we're writing two different points of view, then obviously that's a strength that there's two of us because then we have like a different voice. But even when we have one, we just want it to feel like it just flows from like one chapter into the next. And I feel like we've done it long enough that we're sort of good at like mirroring those things we think maybe the other one will do. But also, like Lo said, we just revise and revise and revise. It's just really hard to get things right the first time. So we're really lucky that one, we get to write the stories that we want to tell, but also that we have time that we can, make it perfect.
Yeah, that's great. I'm curious, a lot of writers are particular when they write, in terms of getting into a zone. There's a particular chair they have to be sitting in or music they've got to have playing in the background. Do either of you have any sort of idiosyncrasies like that?
I always write to music. I usually make a playlist that's like maybe 5 to 7 songs that I just loop over and over until I don't hear the words anymore, but I feel the vibe of the book so that when I sit down and I put it on, it's kind of brings me immediately into that right space. But Christina needs it to be absolutely quiet when she's drafting. She needs like no distractions, no sound. She works at her desk. I like to work sometimes in different places. So it just sort of depends for each person. What your
brain could write on her phone. She will be like, I wrote 800 words on my phone this morning. And I'm just like, I'm just slow. I need to sit in my desk. I can't have any distractions. It's like, I need a sensory deprivation. I used to try and write to like rain. Because there was something about that like white noise sound that worked for me. But one day Lo was like, do you ever notice that there's like something wet in all your chapters? Either there's like the sidewalks are wet or there's the sound of thunder in the distance.
We're writing the book in San Diego at the time. And we were like, it rained, but not that much.
That's right. I love that. Your background noise is seeping in. No, all pun intended, apparently. Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. Lauren, you alluded a little while ago that the pandemic kind of threw a wrench in this whole collaboration process. I'm wondering if you could share a little bit more, you too, Christina, what was that like? How did that, shift, your activities and maybe did you experience a shift in your creativity or your inspiration while quarantining or going through the pandemic?
I think it's funny because I really do think the pandemic hit us at different times because when we very first shut down, like let's say March 13th, I think was the day that I found out my kids wouldn't be going back to school, or at least for a couple of weeks. We were working on the soulmate equation. We had started drafting it on March 1st. And so from March 1st until May 1st, because we wrote this book in only 2 months, it just like flew out of us. We were just sort of possessed with it. It was joyful. Our kids were home. We were all safe. The world felt like it was on fire. And we were just like, it's okay. We're okay. Like, this is what we have to do. And so it didn't, like, we were of course very stressed for what was happening, but we also like just took the advice, like stay home. And we were like, this is all we can do. So we might as well enjoy the process. And then for me, I think it was around September where I had sort of expected things to be better and they weren't, that I was like, okay, what's happening? I can't write anything. I can't read anything. And that was really scary when I just like couldn't read. And I think that I locked up then, whereas I know a lot of our writer friends really locked up early on at the beginning, and that just wasn't the case for us. We were pretty lucky in that sense.
Yeah. I had some, for me, it was like being anxious all the time. Really early on, it was being anxious, but I did not wait to like talk to my doctor and be like, I am very stressed and what can I do? And so that, and then also doing like the, being able to like talk to a psychologist, you know, through the computer. I think that changed a lot of things for a lot of people. We were just really lucky. Number one, that we have each other. And number two, that like the world was crazy, but there was this little pretend world we got to sort of disappear in where everything was fine. Although we did have a lot of discussions like, what's going to happen when this book comes out? Will people write pandemics, you know, this period of time into their book? Like, and the answer was, we didn't know, because we didn't have, the thing about romance is there's a happily ever after. We did not know if this was going to have a happily ever after. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder in what ways the pandemic will literally affect literature, you know, as we come out of it. So, yeah, that's a great point. So, you know, talking about romance, the romance genre, and so in the Soulmate Equation, one of the characters, as you mentioned, Fizzy, is herself a romance novelist, and she loves to tell anyone who will listen, you know, about the positive impacts of romance novels on society. What are the positive impacts for you, for Christina Lauren? What is that positive impact of romance novels on society? Why do we need them?
Oh, wow. I mean, we only have a few more minutes. Go ahead.
Well, I think sometimes people think they know what romance is. And in those cases, we are like, what is the last romance that you have read in however many years? Romance is like very progressive. It's diverse. Romance readers read a lot. And so it really is sort of the first genre I think we start to see a lot of like social change happening in. Also, it's about happily ever afters and everybody getting their happily ever afters. It's like the one genre where you know what's going to happen, but yet you still stick around to see exactly how. So especially I think during the pandemic, people wanted something where they knew there was going to be some joy. But it's also very, not always, but very, you know, usually written by women, read by women. And one of our things is, you know, you hear a lot of people saying, you know, oh, it's my guilty pleasure or something. And we really hate that phrase because as a society, we tend to sort of like lift up and give more worth to like things that involve pain and suffering and not celebrate joy enough. And so if anything, I think romance is just about like celebrating joy and happiness and love and that everybody deserves it.
Yep.
I love that message. I mean, I, for one, gravitate towards levity and, you know, celebrations and happy. I mean, there's enough of, you know, the other stuff in the world. So I definitely appreciated, you know, this book and then the romance genre in general. So is that, do you think, what drives you both to write romance?
I think so. I mean, I think part of it is, it's probably a number of things that keeps us here. You know, one, it's really fun to write kissing. Like, it's just so fun. Two, it's really fun to make each other laugh, and we get to spend time together doing this. So it's like we're getting paid to hang out with our best friends. So we feel like we're sort of getting away with something. But also, it's a really amazing community. You know, it's a community that like keeps us all accountable, pushes for change, pushes for inclusion. There's a lot of really wonderful things about being in this space as a writer, where we sort of feel like we're constantly being stretched and tested and praised and loved. And I think that that's just a really good place to exist as a writer, because writing can be so isolating. So, I mean, we love writing romance because we know when we put this book on the shelf for people, that people who pick up Christina Lauren books and have been following us since the beginning are going to have a moment of joy with it. And like, there's nothing better than making somebody feel good for a little while. So that's why we do it.
It's also been really nice during the pandemic, in a time where all of our book tours were canceled and everyone sort of had to scramble to see what was going to happen. The way that the like author and reader community has come together to like we always say, like, books are not like cars. You don't buy just one. Like, so if I find a book I love, I'm going to look for more books that I might love. And then Lo's going to tell me the books that she loved. And you're going to tell me that. And, you know, and if there's one thing that readers that like, you know, especially romance readers, when they love something, they tell everybody. And that's just a really great part of this whole community.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. Thanks. You know, thinking about like the couples that you write, you know, romances and relationships are so different from couple to couple. How do you write characters specifically in a couple that, you know, are different from book to book, of course, but appeal to so many readers?
I mean, I think if you start with the idea that there are so many ways to be strong and to be smart and to be, you know, ambitious or funny, that if you embrace the idea that everybody has like these qualities just in different combinations and in different shapes, it's easy to come up with people that are delightful to read about, but don't all sound the same. So I think we do try and spend a lot of time. Usually we pick the heroine first and we figure out who is she, what are her quirks, what are her eccentricities, what are the things that she wants that she doesn't have yet. We don't think so much about what her life is missing, but we think a little bit about like, what would make her happier than she is now. And so that helps us figure out like why the hero would be the perfect person for her, right? He's not there to fix her. He's not there to complete her. He's just there to make her life better. And I think, you know, we do have conversations where we think, okay, this character is like a little bit eccentric. We just have to make sure she doesn't sound exactly like Hazel from Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating. Or this female character is really bossy. We have to make sure she doesn't sound like Chloe. So there are things that we are realize now when we look back on our backlist and say, okay, we have done a female character who has some of these same personality traits or challenges, and we just have to make sure she's distinct. So, I think if you prioritize that as a writer, it ends up being okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, gotcha. And then, you know, in your research on genetic matchmaking, did your understanding of compatible couples and, you know, how people fit together, did that change at all with this, you know, research on genetic matchmaking?
I mean, I know nothing about genetics, but I felt very smart while we were writing this. I listened to a podcast yesterday that somebody had read the book, and she was like, I am like a math major now that I read this book. Like, I am basically a scientist. And I learned a lot about genomes and, you know, how all of these things are done and assays and, you know, all of this stuff. But did any of it stick with me? Not really. But during that time, I felt very smart.
I don't really think it's changed how we see compatibility. I think it's just like one other way to look at it, you know, and we had so many cool philosophical conversations about what genetic compatibility means, because we don't want it to be like, well, you are from, you know, this small town in California, so you're going to be compatible with another person from this small town in California. It's like your soulmate might live in Singapore. Your soulmate might live in Turkey, you know? And how do you create a world where compatibility isn't about likeness? It's about like, you know, just having a soul that vibes the same way. And when you talk about that on a scientific level, that's not a thing. So you have to find a way to put that into books, into the book, so that it makes sense for people who both don't speak science and people who do. So that was really fun.
Lo's husband is a scientist, and I'm imagining him hearing her say, whose souls vibe the same way.
I know. He'll be like, oh,
he'll be like,
where's the scientific paper on that? On souls vibing together, the peer-reviewed study.
Yeah, it's out there, I swear.
I love it. I mean, you know, talking about souls vibing, I love the, you know, the energy between the both of you, even though you're in, you know, different states and whatnot. I'd love to hear more about, you know, how you know, in what ways writing together, you know, boosts your friendship, and then the reverse, like in what ways does your friendship then boost, you know, the writing process for you?
I think we always make sure that we put as much time and effort into our friendship as we do our business. Like when we have friends or, you know, people ask us about co-authoring, we always have to tell them that, like, this is a business. You have to make sure, like, I don't know what we were thinking, that we were just like, let's do it. But there are so many things that could go wrong.
Right.
Like you could both be completely opposite on opposite ends of the spectrum about how you spend money or, you know, all of these things. So we just make sure that we always put as much time into that. So sometimes like our favorite thing to do is go to concerts together, just be complete dorks. But obviously we haven't been able to do that for a while. But I think like one of the best things is always having somebody to celebrate all of the wonderful things that happen. And then also having somebody who's to sort of commiserate when like things were stuck or something's hard or, you know, whatever. And we get to travel together. We've like been all over the world together. We get to go places and be like, well, guess we better go to Disney World or, you know, we're in France. Well, it's research.
Yep. No, it's true.
It's true. That's fantastic. I love it. So then I had a question about Jess, who, you know, is the main character in the soulmate equation. She's a mother. And so I'm wondering, you know, what was important for you to portray in a single mother raising a 7-year-old, or is it 8? I can't remember.
She's 7. Yeah, I think, you know, we really wanted Juno as her daughter. We wanted Juno to feel fully realized and not just like another responsibility on Jess's plate, right? It wasn't just to make Jess's life feel busy. Juno, we wanted to make Jess's life feel full and important and like focused. And, you know, Jess has a very complicated relationship with her own mother. Her mom sort of wasn't around. She was an addict. She was very flaky, bad with money. And so Jess was essentially raised by her grandparents, who she lives with now in the book, and who help her with Juno. And so Jess's thing about dating isn't so much like, well, I'm going to just not date because I have a daughter. It's also very deeply rooted because she sort of feels like any selfishness on her part is a slippery slope into turning into her mother. And so that is her biggest fear, is that Juno is going to end up with an absent mother and Jess is going to fail her that way. And so we wanted Juno to be smart and engaged and loving, but also just a kid who had her own interests and felt like her own person other than just being a kid on the page. And she needed to have a connection to River that sort of went outside of whatever Juno and Jess's connection was and Jess and River's connection was, right? We needed their bond to also be distinct from the other two. And so we had a lot of fun writing Juno. I mean, I personally don't gravitate to books, romance novels that have kids, because I have kids. And there's, you know, and there's just stuff that you have to consider when, not that I hate having my kids. I love my kids, but I'm saying, like, when you're writing a romance, you want to go out on a date, you have to consider like the babysitter, and you can't be too loud later. And there's just things that you have to think about that are like not necessarily conducive to like the wild, passionate romance, right? But I think, you know, when it's executed well, and I do think we did it well in this book. I don't usually say that kind of stuff, but I love Juno. I think it can be additive and it feels just more real to the reader, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, that was like the longest answer I have given.
No, I love it. I love it because it definitely touched on everything. And, you know, I love that balance, you know, that struggle that Jess had between wanting something and not, you know, not wanting to slip into, you know, just, a typical bitter single mom, but then not also wanting to, you know, feel like she shoved Juno aside the way she, you know, felt.
And then pushed aside.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I appreciate that. Thanks, Lauren. I think we've got a couple questions from the chat. So let's go ahead and take one of those now. Pamela is asking, what projects are in the works for Christina Lauren?
So our other book that we wrote during the pandemic, we have just turned it in. We just finished revisions on it, is like, we felt like everybody was going to sort of be looking for like adventure. We've all kind of been home and stuff. So, it's sort of a play on Romancing the Stone, like meets The Hangover. It's about, her name is Lily, and she's this like cowgirl who lives in the like Red Rock Mountains of southern Utah, and she takes people out on like fake treasure hunts. And on what she thinks is going to be her last trip out there, this guy that she, you know, was in love with when she was younger shows up, and it's possible there's real treasure.
Ooh, that's super exciting.
It was so fun I mean, we really loved writing the Soulmate Equation, but this adventure book, which we haven't announced a title for yet, was the most fun drafting experience we've ever had. Like, we could not wait to sit down and work every morning. It was just amazing. Oops.
And I think you're right in that, you know, we're ready to get back out there. We're ready for some, you know, adventures away from home. So, yeah, I'm excited for that one. That'll be great. Let's see. Do we have any more questions? Oh, here's the next one. Dorsey's asking, your previous books were a little bit more edgy and racy. Are you purposely changing the style of your writing?
So I said before that we're sort of lucky that we get to write the books that are in our head at the time. And one of the things that's been really fun is sort of making those worlds bigger, making the stories bigger. And so by definition, that takes people out of the bedroom more. I think that like the Soulmate Equation is pretty racy in that they are soulmates. So there's definitely some tension there. Will we have like sexier books? Yes. But it's funny because like the Unhoneymooners is one of our like it's our probably most closed door romance. And yet that's like one of our absolutely
highest selling books. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is it just depends on the characters. We are very rarely ever like, you know, well, the characters speak to us or something, but we tried to make Unhoneymooners sexier and it just did not work. It
was so awkward. We just couldn't make it like, yeah.
It seriously felt like Olive and Ethan were looking at us like, are you going to go? Like, go on, you know? Yeah. And so we ended up cutting that scene. So it really just depends on the story that we're telling, if it fits in their relationship, if it fits in like the overall thing. So probably, maybe it just depends.
Yeah. Do you ever have an idea in your head of what, you know, a couple will do or, you know, how racy things are going to get? And then just as you're writing the story, the characters almost tell you, you know, no, we're not going to go that direction. Like, do you change in the middle or, you know, as you're writing?
So I think Josh and Hazel is a pretty sexy book. That book has some really sexy scenes. And I don't think we could have predicted that when we started, but there was just something about the two of them when they finally gave into it that was just like very sexy. And on the other hand, we would have expected Olive and Ethan to just be like ripping each other's clothes off. And they were both just like, they did, we just didn't get to see it, you know? And like in the Soulmate Equation, I think the level of heat fits them and also the voice of the book. And the adventure book we just finished has many more sexy scenes. So it just really depends on the story. Like, we love writing it, but we're not going to force it if it's not there.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear that. Okay. Let's see if we have any more questions. Oh, Gabrielle wants to know which podcast Christina.
The one you were saying that they said they're a math major now.
Oh, I don't remember. I don't remember. It was two girls. I don't remember. They tweeted us yesterday, and so I was sort of listening to it as they were talking about the science and stuff. It was funny because one of them was like, but I think one of them is a scientist. I could be wrong. And I'm sitting there going, yes, Lauren. Yes. And the one was like, I mean, I'm practically a math major. And it was just so funny. I was laughing so hard. I love readers.
I know.
That's amazing. Okay. So we have a question submitted via email. Do you have a favorite chapter or part of your book?
I really love the scene where River draws her blood.
Yes.
I know that I think that ended up being like way sexier than one would expect from a blood draw. And it was really fun to write. Yeah.
I was going to say, I agree.
Yeah, you don't really expect a blood draw to be sexy. And yeah, I love the range of emotions in that from the, are you a licensed phlebotomist?
Yeah.
I did not write that. And as I was reading it, I was like, okay.
Yeah, I love that where he's like, yeah.
It's anything where there is this almost like, I mean, one of the things we love about sort of fake dating or, you know, is that they're forced into this like physical closeness. And that's what this was. So
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I really enjoyed that scene too. That's a great answer. Let's see. Do we have any more questions? Oh, yes. Jackie wants to know, I love how River, the male lead, has a real job. I was wondering if he's based on anybody. I was wondering, too, like if these characters are inspired by anyone in particular.
I mean, I think there's a little bit of Mr. Darcy in River. I think we wanted that feeling to be initially to pop off the page, like when he calls Jess average, which to him is an insult, right? Because he's speaking about her as a test subject. They need people who are going to represent the greater data set that they're hoping to get. So there's the Darcy bit. But I think in terms of his job and stuff, probably my husband a little bit. I mean, my husband is very River in the sense that he is very contained and even and analytical. And so I think when we had to fall back on moments where River was kind of like holding himself in or being very like analytical internally, it was easy to draw from, you know, both of us and how well we know my husband. So
like the part towards the end where he thinks that he just hasn't talked to her in a few days and it's been like 8 or something. That's just because, you know, as a scientist, when he is like working he's so in his head that time, literally everything else just sort of disappears. And I don't think I realized that sort of how a science brain worked until like I met Lo and her husband.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. We've got a couple more questions, and Lucila wants to know which book that you guys wrote is your most favorite.
This is hard. I don't think we could choose. I think by definition, our favorite, this is such a cop-out, but it's actually true, that our favorite book at any given moment is the one that we're writing at that moment. And that's sort of what readers want, even though you think you want to hear us say, like, you know, a different book. You want it to be our favorite because that's what means it'll be good when it gets into your hands, right? Like, we have to fall in love with it in order for you guys to fall in love with it. So I think right now, the adventure book is probably our favorite thing we've ever done. I think if we had to go like pre-soulmate equation, I would say, oh my God, I don't know. Love and Other Words, maybe. Josh and Hazel. I love them. I don't know.
Yeah, I would say sometimes it's just the experience while we were writing it. So autobiography is special to us because that book sort of holds a place in our heart. Mm-hmm. Josh and Hazel is special to me because I was really struggling with insecurity and stuff as a writer. And then when we started writing that book, it was a moment where I was like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. And then On Honeymooners is fun because Lo and I have done a lot of the things that they do in Hawaii. So it's like happy memories. So it really is just like, it'd be hard. It's like picking a favorite kid.
Yeah, I could see the conflict on your faces. Like, I don't know what to choose.
Yeah. I don't want to hurt their feelings.
Yeah. They're all listening.
Yeah.
I love that. All right, I think we have one final question from Stacy, who's asking, will we see any more from Chloe and Bennett and their crew, or Mia, Ansel, Harlow, and Finn?
Well, so Mia is in the soulmate equation. I don't know
if
anybody thought that. She's Juno's ballet teacher. We just mentioned her. Yeah, I mean, so 2023 will be the 10-year anniversary for the Beautiful series. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure we'll be talking about them a bit as we get closer. I don't know exactly what we'll do to celebrate it. I mean, that series has really that's what launched us. You know, it's sold millions of copies. So I think we really do want to market in some way. We just don't know how yet.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Wonderful. Okay. Well, unfortunately, that's all we have time for. And I want to thank all the fans for those questions. You can order the Soulmate Equation through the Festival of Books bookstore. The link is coming up. There it is, right down below. And purchasing the book through the Festival bookstore supports our local independent bookseller partners, which keeps our local businesses thriving. So thank you for that. Our next Meet the Author on July 1st features debut author Kauai Strong Washburn and his book Sharks in the Time of Saviors, which is a Barack Obama 2020 book of the year. And mark your calendars for the 2021 San Diego Union-Tribune Festival of Books on August 21st as a virtual experience this year. The 2021 festival hosts an incredible lineup of award-winning authors, books, and storytellers, with sessions for everyone from young readers to adults, with topics from traveling post-pandemic, climate change, and true crime. You You can visit sdfestivalofbooks.com to see the complete lineup of authors and events. I hope you all enjoyed meeting Christina Lauren, and please share this video. Christina Lauren, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you. This was so fun. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
We'll see you all soon.
Yay!